Okay, so first of all, we're going to take you to Yunnan, southwest China. So the area that we're looking at is basically north of Myanmar or Burma. And it's an area that has a unique and amazing cultural heritage in China. Most of the minority ethnic groups are located in Yunnan. There's probably about 56 ethnic minorities in Yunnan, and the tribe that we were looking at building a hotel for is called the Wa tribe. Their heritage is potentially connected to the Maori tribe in New Zealand, but they have a very warrior spirit, and you'll see some pictures of that through their village. That this is a very historical village. It's quite rustic or a bit raw, and you'll see that through the pictures. So perhaps we'll just flick through. This is actually investigating in the village. So we wanted to get a feel for the cultural heritage of the area to try to ascertain what their aesthetic legacy is, so that we could integrate that into the hotel language. So here we are sitting in a fire on the inside of the house, which is traditional for them. They'll sit with the cat in the middle and talk around the fire with the tea burning all day. And you can see the soot-covered lining of the ceiling. It is going 24 hours a day. The temperature down there is mostly mild, 25 degrees, so there's not too much of a worry about hermetically sealed buildings, which is a very comfortable climate to live in. Very agrarian society. Very welcoming, lots of singing and dancing, and they're still wearing the ethnic minority clothes, and the cultural heritage is alive and well there. But at the same time, the Han minority of China is coming down and building lots of retirement housing stock and making themselves more and more present in this very delicate ethnic minority area. So we wanted to take the approach with the hotel to respect the local cultural heritage as much as possible and offer the hotel not just to be a generic Southeast Asian hotel, but to actually integrate the Wa tribe and make the hotel part of their community facility, so that they could actually build off that hotel and be part of the modernising process rather than being left behind. Because you see the progression in China is young people have starry eyes for the city and are leaving their heritage, and that's partly due to a detachment from modern society. So we have to take the aesthetic and the traditions of the past and try to modernise them so that they feel connected and have a genuine respect for their culture, that it is alive and well and continuing into the future. They don't have to leave it to go to a place like Shanghai to be part of the future. Unless these amazing tribes are part of the future, they'll sort of get left behind and die off. And we really feel that it's important to respectfully modernise their language, well, their aesthetic language, so that they stay there, and so that they take on and keep wearing the fashion and keep embracing the songs that are sort of being forgotten a little bit, or more, they become more Hanified. They will send a Han majority to try to turn their songs into a Chinese love story or something. But we wanted to make this hotel more about the Wa people and say as much as we could about their culture rather than a generic Southeast Asian hotel. So here you can see all of the huge chunky timbers and their connections between the beams and the columns are just a hole that are pegged through. It's a very direct construction, but a massive sort of tree felling exercise that has lots of pomp and ceremony attached to building a house in these areas. That will have the typical structure that they would use is called a hongmao shu tree, and they would drag it down the road with a chicken on top of it. And at the end of the road, when they get to the main part of the village, the chicken gets its head cut off and everybody sings. So then they can build the house. But this is one of the small hotels that we stayed in the Bulang area. So they were looking at just acquiring a couple of the houses in the village and making that part of the village setup, and we took that idea and worked with that agenda for the Misty Lake Wa Mountain Hotel, because to make the hotel occupants feel like they've entered a village rather than a hotel experience, they're getting a more, what they say, cultural tourism is a much more alive and integrated experience into an area that you're travelling to more understand it while still having the modern luxuries of a hotel facility. So we were using the local textures and materials of the area, lots of bamboo in this area. Bamboo in China has a difficult proposition because they see it as a sort of cheap material, and to use it in a hotel circumstance, a lot of the Han people will not be too comfortable about paying a lot of money to stay in a bamboo facility, but we're trying to change that. And it is changing, but it just takes time. And you can see a lot of the local techniques coming through in these pictures. We wanted to integrate these techniques into the hotel. The slate roofs used to be thatched roofs, but they had a nasty tradition of catching fire because of the fire on the inside of the house. So eventually the government stepped in and tried to update the local houses with some slate. That cladding surface there is actually a bamboo that's been split and fanned out. As a close-up of the bamboo. At the back. This is the peg sort of structure through. And this is one of the balconies that you would come out into a sun deck. Those decks, the floor is very uneven, and that's only just a small thin layer of bamboo to step out onto. So it's a good thing these people are quite light. This is a flooring for the hotel, woven bamboo again. A preparation of baijiu, I guess. They're the gourds in the area. The construction of that deck, you can see it's pretty light. That's the hay. These are the trees in the area. It's very similar to Avatar. The trees' roots just go on forever and sometimes stretch across the road. Outdoor living is very simple, quite beautiful, just raw, easy lifestyle there. They do have issues of alcoholism, and it's in the Golden Triangle. It used to be the old Golden Triangle, so there's some drug issues too. But
so one of the things that we felt about the Wa people was that they're a little they're facing the sort of issues that the Aboriginal people are here in Australia, and that they're getting a little bit railroaded by the majority people, the Han people in China, and they're not, and people are coming in and telling them what they should be doing, and you see that there's a high level actually of alcoholism and poor health. The villages, if you go far enough into the hinterland, are very poor. We've taken our pictures sort of are taking, maybe romanticising a little bit what they have, but the poorest are dirt poor.
there's a lot of
It happens that they're in a pretty good climate, so shelter is just shelter from the rain is the main thing. Heating and cooling is not such a problem. But anyway, so coming from Australia, we felt this strong, if you like, affinity with them, and we were hoping not to participate in the exploitation of their culture or the bamboozlement of their culture, and often that is happening.
Another sad reality for the area is a lot of the cultural specific places of significance for the tribes are being taken for hotel developments and other residential repurposing, and the locals are going in for what they see as the last days enjoying the site before it's privatised. And it's very sad to see their way of taking over the site is to particularly, not intentionally trash it, but they have a difficulty understanding the issues of pollution and rubbish. And if you think of America back in the 60s, Yunnan is undergoing the same sort of adjustments to their society. Like, not long ago, they didn't have any plastic bottles and other snack food and waste products that wouldn't degrade naturally. If we were walking along the road, there'd be a guy that was selling a kind of mushroom mobile on the street that's just basically threaded mushrooms held together by a stick. There's no plastic bag, and this sort of hyper-modernisation is a little bit difficult to deal with, and I think the China government is eventually going to come around to the issue of recycling, but it will take some time.
One of the interesting things about working in a place like this, and with the idea that we're trying to find a genuine Wa tradition, is that we weren't there for long enough, and what we saw, what we were taken to, were often not Wa buildings, and there is about 6 different ethnic groups in this particular area. And actually over time, and in the last maybe 20 or 30 years, their buildings have started to look similar. So it is a real issue as to, with that sort of intent of trying to be genuine, how you can sort out what makes the Wa tradition different from the Dai tradition, different from the Hulang tradition, or whoever else happens to be around, and they fuse together. As Sara said, the roofs used to all be thatched with rice, the leftover hustings from rice, but all of that's changed, and very few of them now are doing it that way. But the government has come up with this great idea of using pressed aluminium pieces about that long that have fingers on them, and if you lay them over the top, they look from a far distance like they're an aluminium copy of a thatched roof. They look pretty shitty. That's not the way we see forward. It's better to accept that there needs to be change in that, and try and keep the substance, and rather than trying to ape something that can't be aped unless you actually do it as thatch.
There's also what these pictures here trying to illustrate some asbestos problems that they're still digging asbestos in Yunnan because the government makes a lot of money from it, so they're not going to stop. And we tried to send out some information to the client to educate the locals on the dangers of asbestos, and it's a very difficult and tricky issue because the government is so interconnected with all the developments, and they have their industry to support themselves. So in many ways it's going to be tricky to try to curb the government's enthusiasm for making money.
But one of the things that we saw with the Wa buildings, we don't seem to have the right one, but there's, as opposed to the various other ethnic minorities, that there's a lot of this sort of cantilevering. Often rooms will cantilever off the side outside the posts, and all of the beams are just basically threaded through the uprights, and continue out and cantilever. And there's this bit over here has got some quite complex bracing back from the pole. We'll obviously pass our structural rules, but that's the sort of thing, and the general use of timber, roof shapes, openness, light that we tried to bring into what we were doing.
This was on Chinese New Year. It's fantastic to go to these areas in Chinese New Year, but generally you'll hear a lot of pigs screaming because it's their last day.
That's the sort of complexity that you get with this bit over here, just one piece coming out there that's threaded into the pole, and it looks like it's holding it up, but yeah, you'd be hard pressed to actually prove it structurally, but they seem to work.
Baijiu, be careful. If you go to China, you'll have to drink some. It's dangerous stuff. This is a breakfast we had to barter with the locals for, so...
It's important that you get, to do something like this, it's important that you involve yourself with the culture, and you meet people, drink their booze, try and not get too drunk, hold up your end so you don't disappoint. Well, they're not going to think that much of you if you get drunk too easily, but getting drunk with them, it's good. It's bonding.
They say that you can tell the true character of a person, so the intention is to find out who you are. This is our site, the lake on site. It's called Misty Lake or Longtan, and off to the left is our site. This is actually the jungle that we were given on site. And this was the original council buildings that were falling down, unfortunately, and had a lot of timber rot in them. Our intention was to keep some of them and add to that, but it was difficult to convince the government and the client to do that because the buildings were in such bad condition. But we borrowed from the language to recreate them. So the positioning of these huts is basically a kind of treehouse aesthetic, so pass through the landscape to individual houses and allow the landscape to run underneath those houses up on poles, as you saw through the village, and be connected through the main buildings, but also be part of the landscape and looking through the trees at all times. This was a very early scheme, and it had multiple iterations, eventually found its form. This is an entry into what we conceived as the village square, and is in one of the main corridor buildings to the left, across the creek there. Water is very, very important to Chinese. It's a symbol of wealth and prosperity, so there had to be a bridge building. And also the gate building through to kind of formalise the square arrangement to give people that sense of security and enclosure of space. The meeting hall to the top right area is the tallest building, and then the spa with accommodation above overlooking the creek below, and then the existing buildings that this area was actually an army barracks once upon a time, so that is an existing building that's been retrofitted. That's the upstairs plan of the spaces. This is the corridor building across the creek there. It's all timber construction, borrowing from the Wa language that's set up. A lot of the through beams through the columns are established as a modern sort of language. That's the gatehouse coming through. This is the meeting hall. So the emphasis in those boxes is always a downwards view, which is quite common in all of the houses of the area that we went through. They're very private and dark spaces, but they're always sort of looking down to the ground. And open, very open, naturally ventilated, easy to have connection, maintain connection to the landscape. This is the built reality of the city square, if you like, village square.
So just going back to this is the arrival point around here, and the buildings are deliberately organised to form like a village gathering place and a place for ceremonies. So as Sara was referring to before, each year they pull a log along, which is sort of has religious significance, and they kill a chicken, and they pull it through the town. It's become a tourist attraction now. Instead of happening once a year, it happens every feast day, or whenever the Han Chinese are down in sufficient numbers, they organise another log to be pulled along.
But they usually use the same log now. There's too many trees.
Yeah. Don't worry about the trees. It's the same log. But we organised this to save all of the trees. One of the features of this, which is, it's not exactly architecture, but all of the trees of any significance were kept all over the site, and that was possibly one of our greatest victories in this project. and to the point where they are now saying they see this as a big thing for themselves, and in fact are saying it was their idea all along, which is good. So these are the buildings that ring around and give the scale to this central space. We also have the town not far away. This is quite a very heavily forested site, but it's not that far from the town. And so we organised the buildings in such a way that they would shield the view, because it's supposed to be the feeling that you're a long way away, that you're in the countryside, and unfortunately the sounds do get here, but the building mass has made it feel quite isolated.
Some of the accommodations in the trees, coming up through the main stair to the fireplace villa and the pool. This is the pool, located so that you'd feel a connection to the lake beyond there. It's a sort of infinity edge pool. It's not heated, but it's usually quite temperate to go in there. And the landscape, we wanted to introduce the rice paddies of the area, which are so prominent in the landscape, as well as the tea trees. And of course, having said that they have to have rice paddies, that means you have to farm them. So we got involved in that as well. This is the fireplace villa, which is perhaps the closest building towards the Wa aesthetic on site. This was our initial sketches for the fireplace villa, with a kind of cantilevered structure of the main columns and stepping out to basically try to encapsulate the space but be connected, projecting out the forms of the space, and also giving it the space to be surrounded by lounges, so putting yourself outside of the space, being more connected into the landscape.
It rains a lot, and we don't do pitched roofs very often, but we recognise that pitched roof was the appropriate thing to do here, and part of the particularly for a tall building, the top floors are hanging out, the lower floors go back in, so that if you're using bamboo on the outside, which is what our intention was, the water doesn't get on the bamboo, doesn't rot it, and when it rains, it is in torrential rain.
Monsoon.
So it has that sort of stepping down feeling, depending on how tall it is.
The structure we really loved. This is a rendered plan with the fireplace in the middle and the beds to the outside, and an almost outdoor shower, and the seating base that you could use as sleeping single beds if you wanted to, and a big outdoor room with the wash basin outside. So connection to the outdoors was critical. This is a small render of the space. I hope you can see the reference to the local village. That's the fireplace.
That's the fireplace. And normally you would hang things to, cooking utensils and whatever, but if you were smoking something like an animal or a pig or smaller perhaps than a pig, you would put it up there, and you would sit around. This is a little bit more deluxe than the basic at-home version, because normally you're sitting on little stools around the fireplace, and this one has a place where you can eat around it.
Sketch. This is the first mock-up we went to see on site. So you get the huge garden just breathing in through the space, so the connection between natural timber and structural timber areas are quite pronounced. Great spot for a picnic in the half-built house. And these are the Wa dancers off to the left, and the building inspection team to the right. The outdoor room. These are the finished fireplace houses, and the mist coming off the roof, just from rain the night before. This is inside the bathroom, looking out over to the National Forest, basically. This is the roof with those huge timber beams. This is in the bedroom, looking through to the living room out to the outdoor balcony. This is in the bedroom. In the living room, enjoying a performance by the local singer. Outside, parked in the National Forest, looking up at the fireplace villa. Two of them. And this is, there's a darker side to the Wa people, but maybe you can find that out when you go there. Next project.
So one of the things when we were doing this, when we did these drawings as a prototype, and we arrived down on the site and found that they'd got, it was a design that was meant to be a prototype, and we go down there and they've built it. They've changed quite a few things. But one of the things that they did was get these big logs, and they were milling them on the site. They set up a sawmill on the site, and they were cutting them, and they were putting them up pretty much straight away in green condition. Or they were, if they weren't ready, they were lying them on the ground and willy-nilly, and they were lying all over the place, and they were becoming pretzels. So you have this beautiful timber, and it's about 240 square. It's drying badly, they're not treating it properly. The client and the builders have gone out and found people who don't really use timber that much and don't have that much of a tradition in it. Just down the road was a sawmill where they could have bought the timber, and they know how to look after it, but they didn't use them. That is one of the recurring problems in China in general, but in particular in a remote area where people think that they can't look at what's there, they can't really analyse the traditions, the history, and learn from it. They have to somehow or other start as if they've never done it before, which was quite disappointing. And when we saw these bits of timber there, which are in fact termite proof, and this is a termite prone area, and they just, instead of putting them above the ground, they put them into concrete, and because they were green, the beautiful logs started cracking, and they're making cracks all the way up, and the termites are just going to get in those cracks and silently walk up into the building and then get to the roof structure, which isn't termite proof, and probably eat it out. And it may have a life of about 20 years instead of 100 years. So that was disappointing, but it's part of the process of dealing with a place like Yunnan and China in general, just to understand how things can turn around. And we felt like weeping when we saw these great logs, which are protected species, and there's special quotas for them that they had to get to cut them down, and they're being treated so badly. We actually spent a day teaching them how to stack the timber so that it wouldn't warp and so it would dry properly. And this is in a place where, of course, using timber is what they've been using for thousands of years. A little bit ironic, of course.
We also took off the bamboo cladding that they put down on the ground for the termites to climb up to the building. We removed that and taught them to look for termites, as you do in Australia, but we hope they continue to look for the termites.
So there's this duality that we're talking about in our talk tonight, and that was really getting involved with a group who were pretty much close, or quite close to their heritage of hundreds of years or thousands of years. And this one is completely different. This is a resort development in Hainan, which is where there's a lot of beachside interest. People from north of China come down here, buy beachside houses or apartments, and this is a completely different set of circumstances and a different client and a completely different approach. At least the physical outcome is a completely different approach.
These are the conditions when we first came onto the site, and Hainan's undergone extreme renovation blitz over the time that we've been there. When we first came to site, we were going to meetings with a 1930s old house up on the headland of this area, and the air conditioner would go off, and then the power would go off, and then we'd talk to our non-existent PowerPoint presentation. And since then, we've had a 50-story monster built next door to the site, and a military training and retire accommodation on the other side, both of which are huge scale. And Hainan is just becoming a kind of tropical holiday resort town with lots of residences for investment properties.
But what we saw when we got there, our site is to the right of this slide. What we saw is this quite modernist horizontal language, and we were dealing with that. We were wanting to respect what they were doing already. It was quite a good job. There were lots of problems with it, but we didn't want to start adopting a completely different vocabulary. So we were working with that, or at least had some idea of how to work with that.
We wanted to create the apartments to be, as much as possible, try to reconnect with the landscape. So the towers have planted balconies and outdoor rooms, green roof gardens on the townhouses in front, and natural ventilation as a priority to take advantage of the natural sea breezes of the area. Well, this is one of the first preliminary schemes that we did, still trying to promote bamboo screens as such sun shading devices, and obviously taking advantage of the views afforded by the site.
Can we just go back a little bit? So this is what we're talking about is this site here and these buildings. But we've done projects of different parts of all of this, but primarily what we're talking about to start off with is this part here and that strip there, and then a single house over here. This is a later version. It's not what we started off with, and it's like the second. This one is the second version, where there was many versions because there were lots of people in the client group that were piping up at various times. It's like a political party with their factions, and some would win, get ascendancy, and then another group would get ascendancy. So it was an interesting process.
With many facade ideas. So this one was looking at a green facade, like literally having a green trellis across the building with planters that would creep across. And then there was a perforated green screen for the building to filter the harsh tropical sunlight. That's the bamboo screen facade. You can see the depth of the building is utilising these apartments as just a to take advantage of the natural sea breezes, there are only one apartment wide, so that allows you to naturally ventilate each house individually, and they're connected to a series of bridge links, vertical circulation points. The standard setup in China is that you'd run an awful stinking hot corridor along the back side of the development and have one core every 20 apartments. I mean, that's probably a bit of an exaggeration, but the cores would be hot spaces. You wouldn't be able to naturally ventilate your house because the breeze wouldn't be able to be going through the apartment. So our strategy was to keep the houses narrow and allow the breeze to blow through the house and make the cores circulation space external. These are the vertical bridge circulation points, almost like a tree in themselves. This is the outdoor external vertical circulation garden. So you experience entering your house through a vertical garden.
The apartments are in these lines on either side of the garden.
Initial ideas of another adaptation of the building form, which is heading towards those towers that you saw in the first slide.
So at some point, the people next door built up until this stage, there was a 10-storey height limit on this, which was why they were at maximum 10 stories high. And then the people next door, all of a sudden, they're building 30 and 40 stories high. And our clients said, "Hang on, what's going on here? This was not part of the town planning guidelines." And they then approached the government and said, "You know, can we do something like this?" So we changed from the 10-storey to what was 25 stories, and then later on they found some other thing. There's on the hilltop next door is a microwave transmitter station. There's the military complex on this side and like a Pine Gap thing over there, and they're shooting a high energy microwave between the two. And our buildings were said to be in the middle, so we had to drop another 10 stories off it. So now they're about 20 stories at the most.
This is the initial level 4 planning area. It's built on a fake hill, if you like. So the sea level is further down south of this plan, and they've introduced a lot of sand to the site to create their own man-made hill, so that they can build basements underneath the hill and not claim them on a GFA. It's an interesting system they've got going in China that makes things interesting to work in architecture. These are more developed plans at a higher level, so you can see the apartments finding their true form, and the townhouses in front of them. There's a form study of the buildings, eventually finding those landscape planter balconies that also keep the sunshine directly off the glass facade of each of the houses. So shading the external perimeter, making those spaces quite livable inside. So you have a beachfront, fully operable facade, outdoor living rooms and the like to connect you to that perfect beach condition temperature. A view from the balcony looking back along the apartments with those townhouses in front. The model. Walking up from the beach to your apartment, This scheme shows what once were bridge apartments through. And this is walking along the podium area with the townhouses to the right and the apartments to the left. So this is the natural ventilation coming up through those external cores with the atrium in the middle, and the apartments wrap around this outdoor core.
So there's all of the towers have two-storey space at the podium level because the whole focus of all of the apartment planning was to have a sea view, and this was a wall of townhouses at that level. So no buildings were built, no apartments were built at this lower level, but you can see through to the landscape behind, and there are hills in the distance to the right of the slide, and these you can start to see a view from level 6. This isn't always 3 stories, it's 2 and 3, and you can always get a view from 6th level down to the beach. But yeah, this is an early version as well. Maybe it's a little bit higher than it ended up, but it has this internal atrium which is open to the bottom and the top and through, so that the air, by using a Venturi effect, can suck air out of the core of the building and through the surrounding apartments.
And you can also see the natural ground line on the road there. So imagine that line going down to the beach, all of the sand that they've made to create basements out of the man-made hill, and everybody gets a view that way, so it sort of works.
So these are a couple of versions of this apartment tower. This is the atrium, and this part with the lifts and the stair is also open. So that actually had some benefits because an open space doesn't count as part of the gross floor area of the building. So it only counted as 50%, which means that the developer can put more apartments, more space that they can sell. We also have pretty big balconies. Like, these aren't little balconies. They're actually conceived of as the primary living areas of the place, and the doors and the windows push right back so that there's very little obstruction between what is seen as interior and what's seen as exterior. But and that also has advantages for the developer as well, because this is nominally an apartment of let's say 100 square metres of internal area, but it has about 30 or 40 square metres of usable balcony, and all of the windows open up so that each room gets sort of steals more visual and in fact functional space.
This is inside one of the show display apartments. So you get that sense of what it's like to be in this planted balcony wraparound space, so shaded from the sunlight, but also have your garden on the 10th floor looking out to the view of the bay beyond. We pushed very hard to have screened spaces. This room on the left side of the lounge was going to be potentially a bedroom or potentially a tatami tea room facility, but it has the capacity to be a 2-bedroom house or a very generous 1-bedroom area, 1-bedroom apartment.
And also, the interior decoration is not outside. Putting my hand up, don't blame us for that. Why we're showing this is because even though it wasn't, they stuck to our plan, and it was flexible enough for other people to do their decorating thing and still work. And so I know for us it's not what we would have preferred, but it turned out okay, and it meant that at least what was the theory behind it was actually, it worked quite well.
Inside the tatami screened room, this is the typical one-bedroom apartments with 3 apartments. The central one is the first apartment to sell out completely, too quickly. I think the price was too low. The central space is the outdoor space again, and this is an outdoor space. So the lounge room is adjacent on the right side. The kitchen is behind. The bedroom looks out onto the view and has an ensuite behind that. Then the apartments behind a similar strategy to the pictures that you saw before. This is apartment 1B at the front, so planters both sides and the external living space in the middle, and potentially you could have a fold-out bed on the other side as well, but it's a very ambiguous space, so you kind of walk through a corridor and then pop out to the outside of the house before you've even sort of gone into the house. So the view is a very dramatic effect.
This is outside balcony, so it counts as 50% of the space, and it's not that clear here, but there are walls here that push back behind the joinery, so that the kitchen and laundry becomes part of the outside space, as in fact it all does. So it's either one slightly partitioned space, or these can be pulled out so that they're all individual spaces. Again, this isn't our design, the interiors. Sorry.
The planter through. The balcony in the trees. The sales display suite being constructed in the early days. Finished.
So those apartment interiors were in this building, purpose-built display structure.
This is the beginnings of the construction of the actual apartments. When we came on site, we thought it looked more like the Colosseum wreckage. So they're actually core drilling these footings, and that's the effect of those sort of Doric columns. But it's very hand done. This is a sort of, it's an interesting combination of almost old world meets new world in China. You just never really expect both conditions to be running simultaneously, because next door you can see the sort of Star Wars style construction, and that's happening on site at the same time, but it's the difference is fairly dynamic. Soon the scaffolding will be removed. I'm told it's going to be the end of November, but we will wait and see. This is part of the level 3 space with the level 4 in these ribbons of structure above, splitting apart to create this space. This is the tower. When they got to the top of the tower, there's a bit of a ceremony that happens in China. They bring all the animals in on a magic carpet and eat them, carve them up to the locals, and they set off deafening fireworks. Michael set them off actually. So that goes on for a while. I'm not sure why they did it in the daytime, because fireworks are so much better in nighttime, but they certainly had the same sound effect. This is the level 3 retail area and car park adjacent, and that you can see the building forms splitting off that level 4 area to rip apart the form to bring light down to the lower areas of the building. that's the space that we were in before. Michael's looking at on site now. One of those sculptural spaces on the site. And then this one's heading to the townhouses, which are the row houses in front, in basically row 4.
These ones here.
Early render. And the main strategy was for the townhouses was all about shading, sun shading, and outdoor areas, and having a very strong kind of connection of a landscape throughout the building, so that landscape would actually come into the building. Lap pools would go into the house and around the house, and it's very difficult to define where the landscape ends and the house begins. The landscape is part of the houses, and that's sort of a Chinese tradition if you think of the old Suzhou houses. So courtyards and light wells and a sculptural space that really takes care of the landscape and brings it into the house. And that was really important to us working in a tropical area where anything grows. So the space tried to adapt to work with that idea. Tropical, dark, purple spaces and landscaped three-dimensional gardens. This is the space. She's sitting on the yoga deck is here, adjacent the main stair, looking out over that green space there.
So this is here, well, a little bit behind there, but in that location. And what the whole building is, not about 30% of it is actually outdoor space, and quite secure. One of the problems that they were having dealing with villas was that the villas that they bought already, they've got all of these people going around constantly attending to gardens and watering and weeding and everything. And if you happen to be hanging around sunning yourself naked or whatever, you are likely to have someone just walk out in front of you. So the security for, if you don't, in a resort, you want to feel safe and secure and being able to be private. So a lot of our work in these the smaller developments and also the apartments is to ensure that you feel private, that you can participate and take as many clothes off as you like, and no one will be there to look at you. And also in a place like this, you could actually sleep outside and not have any fear that someone is going to be attacking you in the middle of the night. The Chinese are quite conscious of security, and there are security guards in most compounds, as there are in this. But in this case, it was a key part of the design that they feel very secure. They were secure, and that they allow the breezes to blow through. Almost constant cooling breezes from the south through the building and out through the roof at the back and through this opening at the back.
This is a stair going down to the pool area, that pool beyond. And you can see into one of the outdoor decks behind the planter. This is going into the bedroom area. The palette is quite dark, and that's in relation to the tropical sunlight being so ferociously bright that we wanted to contrast that. So the materials are deliberately chosen to take some of the to enable a sort of more mood tropical space inside that cools you rather than maintains that heat of the bright sunlight. This is the form taking place, and the planter wall, that curved planter wall at the back. There's a painted reality and that curved planter wall with the stone facade cladding. The screen with the yoga lady was probably sitting through there. There's a low angle, so you can't see her right now. There's the outdoor balconies through there, and sun shading. This is in the double height space of the atrium over the dining room. So, and these spaces either side of the atrium are bedrooms. So, again, the idea of screen, sort of a reference to the screen spaces of traditional Chinese aesthetics, but taking it to a kind of tropical direction. This is the dining table below, and the kitchen immediately in the foreground, and the lap pool running at the back. So with all the doors pushed to one side, the delineation between inside and outside is really not an issue. You can really open your house up to the outdoors and feel quite private and secure in there. And apparently the pool parties are really good. That's the outdoor deck area of one of the bedrooms. That's the screen that you saw below in the atrium space, with there's a wardrobe with TV shelf space below the screen. The ensuites are actually up 2 steps so that you can see over when you're in the shower. You can see out beyond, across your bed and to the view beyond. So it's a bit of a tricky sculptural play of space happening there. You probably see it a bit more in that picture. That's the bed in front, and a mirrored wall up to a certain timber height level, and in that timber zone is the wardrobe space. And then the mosquito net over the bed, and every bedroom has air conditioning in it, but they have the ability to turn it off if they so desire and let the natural breeze through. There's the master bedroom through here with the desk and the wardrobe behind there, the steps up to that space. Another one of the bedrooms. This is a smaller townhouse with the wardrobe opposite the bed, and the opening up these concertina doors to allow the breeze to blow through. This downstairs of the smaller townhouse with the kitchen behind those cupboard doors. And this is the outdoor deck area. This is the one of the clients' beach houses. So we'll just take you through the axo views of the house. Through the main space, it's conceived of as potentially 2 separate dwellings, but can be used as one. A 7-bedroom house with 2 living areas, 2 kitchens, and 2 pools, 1 spa, 2 spas actually. Yeah. So quite luxurious. This house is directly on the beachfront, in amongst the palm trees, and again the emphasis is on an outdoor room that allows the breezes to go through. Intensely screened, very many operable screens here to allow the tropical sun to maybe dapple the light through the house but not come in fully. This is sitting in the lounge room looking out over the swimming pool to the beach beyond. This is taking a step back through the living room again, and looking through to the courtyard pond area. This is in the kitchen on the level 1 area, and the dining room to the left. This is in the master bedroom, going out into their own private courtyard area onto the beach. And you can see to the left, that's the atrium screened idea of traditional Chinese aesthetic coming into a kind of more contemporary modern language. This is the atrium space in the middle of the house going down to the basement. This is down in the basement, an outdoor living room area with the pond in the middle of the house, letting the light through, but the tree sort of creates a more dappled lighting effect through the middle of the space. This is the built reality of the space. So it's under construction at the moment. We hope that it will be fully finished soon, but there may be some changes. And that's the level 1 space looking down into what will be the atrium space of the basement below. And that's it.
That's it. As you can see, the people who are going to live in this one are somewhat different to the people from Yunnan. It's a completely different market. What we are primarily trying to do here is respond to the climate, to reduce the need for air conditioning, to have the spaces open as much as possible. They're all sort of, I mean, I guess the indoor-outdoor thing is a typical modernist pathway, but in this sort of climate, it makes so much sense. It actually makes sense everywhere, probably, but particularly in this. And the primary rooms are actually haven't got walls around them, both upstairs and downstairs. The whole living and dining area in the basement is without walls. It has the problem with this is that there's a little problem with the climate, that every now and again there's a typhoon, and so that what the outdoor business has to be tempered with the idea that you have to nail your furniture down. But the overhangs are so big that the water won't get in to do any damage. If you keep furniture outside, you just have to bring it in at the appropriate time. That happens maybe twice a year. It's not too bad. It's fun, actually.